Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on the what, the why and the how of community grant making. I'm Houda Davis. I'm a senior researcher at IVAR and I've been leading on this work. Today we have with us, we're really fortunate, I've been leading on this work with my colleague Sonakshi, I should say that actually. Sonakshi, wave to everyone. And I've also got my other colleague Vanessa from IVAR, who's going to be helping with any tech support. So if you need anything, just pop her a direct message. We're really delighted today to have some people from the research and from the big local areas. So we've got Edna, everyone just moved around on my screen. Edna Dunn from Hatley Cross, Karen Harley, the chair from Roseworth, and Jane McPherson from Kingsbrook and Caldwell. We've also got Claire Kiley, who was an advisor for this research, and she's held various roles across the charity and funding sector. She's going to be chairing our Q&A a little bit later on. I think that's everyone. I'll just say something about IVAR. So we're a research charity, and we work with charities and trusts and foundations and public agencies to strengthen communities across the UK through our action research. And we were commissioned by local trusts, and I'm just going to hand over to Laura briefly just to say a little bit about local trusts and why they commissioned the research.
Hi everyone, yeah, I'm Laura. I'm in the research team at Local Trust. Local Trust are a place-based funder supporting communities to transform and improve, their lives and the places in which they live. We believe that there's a need to put more power, resources and decision-making into the hands of communities. And we aim to demonstrate the value of long-term, unconditional resident-led funding. And to draw on learning from our work, delivering the programme to kind of promote a kind of wider, to promote the values and the wider approach with other kind of funders and policymakers and those who work with local communities and in the place. We commissioned this specific piece of work looking at community grants because we wanted to better understand the role that community grants play in the big local model. They're very common across a lot of our big local areas. And so we wanted to know more about how do they help residents to take more control in their communities. So hopefully you'll be able to take some of the learning from this great bit of research into your own work, whatever that may be. Thanks, Houda.
Thank you. So just say something about the format. So Sonakshi and I are going to share some of the key findings from this research, and then we'll hand over to people from big local areas, and then we will move into the Q&A. We're actually going to use the chat for the Q&A, but we'll remind you again when that starts rather than the actual Q&A function. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll start the presentation.
Should I kick off, Houda?
Yes.
Yeah. So this presentation will share a few insights from our action research on community grant making with 4 of our big local areas, and really delighted to have some of our research partners here to share their experience of running community grants and the benefits that they've had for their communities. And as Houda said, we really hope that this learning from this work would help influence funders and local voluntary organizations and groups thinking about community grant making or already running their community grant program in a way. And yes, we'll talk about the where, what, how, and why of community grant making in this presentation. So the where bit of it. So we ran this action research in 4 big local partnerships, namely Hatley Cross, Kingsbrook and Caldwell, Rastrick, and Roseworth. All of these wanted to develop their community grants program and were at a point in which they were at a development or a transition of these programs. So we worked in partnership with each of these areas to develop a particular focus for their action research. And the larger report draws out overarching learning, looking across 3 specific areas that we explored. Firstly, the context, conditions, and considerations for successful community grant schemes. Secondly, we looked at how community grants help to develop engagement with big local, develop local capacity and enhance the voluntary and community sector at the local level. And finally, the role of community grants in helping to develop and enhance community control. So the way IVAR's action research approach works is that we start with a practical problem, challenge, or opportunity, and we worked with our 4 areas to pin down what really needs to be addressed. And we supported them to look at the challenges and the opportunities and drew out few interesting solutions for them to test out. And I think our overall aim was to generate learning through questions, reflections, and debate to produce better outcomes that are meaningful and long lasting. So on that note, what are community grants? I think we've looked at community grants with 3, next slide please, Houda, at 3 levels. One is they're made usually at the community or the grassroots level. Secondly, that they are resident led. And thirdly, they are small grants and could be anywhere between £50 to £5,000. And then one of the areas has looked at the purpose of community grants in the next slide as a quote. And they have talked about how they wanted to reach out more widely and create opportunities for people to take a chance upon and trial different things that benefit the local community in a way. So handing over to you, Houda.
Thank you, Sonakshi. So how are partnerships using community grants? So first of all, they are providing new opportunities and activities for their communities. That was a primary motivation for the groups that we were working with. And some of the things they're supporting are pretty wide-ranging. So, for example, it might be funding some new play equipment in a local park, or testing out new services or activities like an art class to tackle social isolation, or buying equipment for a new litter picking group. And partnerships were particularly keen to incubate new ideas and support below the radar organisations, so kind of informal groups to get established and sustain their activities. So, for example, in Whitley Bay, one of the big local partnerships we interviewed for this research, they're supporting an informal deaf and sign group to get established and kind of incubating them. Secondly, community grants are helping to sustain existing community activities and infrastructure. They are a fundamental resource to supporting local groups and keeping good things going. So, for example, they might use grants to support and run a one-off project in a school or for a uniformed group. And that was about kind of providing something a bit extra special. And big local partnerships found that it was important to be funding these existing groups and organisations because it helps them build connections and relationships with these groups, which then help them engage a wider different parts of the community, other residents, community leaders, and public agencies. So as a result, big local partnerships have become a more significant part of the local infrastructure. And thirdly, and really importantly, community grants are helping individuals and groups with capacity and skills. So the intended impact of the community grant doesn't start and end with the grant, but forms part of their broader priorities to build local capacity and support community action. And the outreach work that takes place helps to encourage groups and individuals not already engaged in big local to apply for the funding, as well as developing the skills and confidence to turn their ideas into a reality. So what makes community grants successful. So based on our work in the 4 areas, successful community grants were described as those that fund things that respond to community need, but also balance support for existing projects with funding new ideas. Areas really realised that they wanted to do both of those things. And also community grants stimulate excitement about big local and community activity and organising. Now, the form and structure of community grants really varied according to each partnership's specific context and their priorities, but we can identify 5 overarching characteristics that were key to the success of community grants programmes. I'm going to skip over the first 2 a little bit because I think that the last 3 are more relevant to the audience, but the first one was having a really clear purpose and a shared vision, and that's something that we worked with the organisation with partnerships through this action research to kind of help develop, and also an understanding of local needs and issues, again something we worked with partnerships to think through. So thirdly, or partnerships were really thinking, given that they wanted to attract new people to apply for community grants, about how their grant making processes could be as accessible and inclusive as possible. And really they were grappling with the same or similar kinds of problems to the wider funding sector, in terms of trying to avoid really long application processes, but trying to carry out the due diligence at the same time. So we work with partnerships to review their application and reporting processes, and things that were kind of useful were only asking for the information that you need, using accessible language, accepting applications in a range of formats, and then doing some user testing of your process. Because partnerships really wanted their grants to be as fair and transparent as possible, and also just helping residents who were making the grants mitigate some of the power imbalances that are just inherent when one person is giving resources to another. So fourthly, partnerships did find it quite challenging to collect the information that they needed to understand how community grants were making a difference. So establishing some appropriate monitoring and reporting and learning processes was important. And this is a really tough balance to strike, because these are pretty small grants, and asking for lots of information wouldn't be appropriate. But we found some useful approaches, like being clear about what information is needed when, right from the outset, and allowing funded partners to choose how they provide feedback. And that could sometimes just be through an email and providing some photos, because partnerships really valued being able to use that to talk about their community grants and publicise them, and also visiting projects to see how they're working firsthand. So lastly, a willingness to try new things and take risks. I think that we found that encouraging new ideas means that partnerships have to be comfortable taking some risk on activities that haven't been tried and tested. And in Maastricht, actually, for them, the process of people applying was just as important as the outcome, and they were willing to take a risk on people's ideas, because really what they were trying to do was build confidence and skills of local people. And all 4 areas hoped that that this would create a ripple effect, this building confidence and skills, and that residents would go on to not only run the projects that they're applying for funding for, but in the future perhaps take part in other community activities. On reflection, kind of thinking about the action research process, I think ensuring grants to ensure that grants programmes remain relevant and responsive requires building in space for reflection and review and adaptation. And this action research with the 4 partnerships showed the value of setting aside some dedicated time and space to think through some of the challenges and make changes to their grant making process. So why support community grants? So firstly, community grants are a really flexible tool within the big local model, and they're used in a whole range of ways to support community action right at the grassroots. Secondly, community grants help support community control. Involving residents in decision making increases the amount of control they have. So community control defined by local trust is the range of ways that communities can bring to life some of the changes that they want to see locally and give them the power to make the decisions about things that really affect them. And community grants enable local residents to really take ownership of both identifying and actioning local priorities, and community grants also provide an opportunity for people with different levels of experience and backgrounds to take part in decision making, as well as providing a financial resource to allow people to action their ideas. Thirdly, community grants are, as I've said, building local skills and capacity, both of those making the decisions, because that was a learning process. It was certainly a learning process for the people that took part in this research, but also for those that are applying for funding to deliver projects. So, for example, in Rastrick, a group of local mothers wanted to improve their local playground, and they got a small grant from Big Local, and with some support from Big Local and also the local CBS, they actually went on to fundraise £90,000 to redevelop their local playground. So community grants gave them the confidence and the skills and also the networks needed to take the initial steps to make that happen. So as well as supporting, finally, as well as supporting community projects, partnerships also recognise the need to support local infrastructure like community hubs or other community centres, so that residents and groups and organisations have a place to connect and grow in the longer term. And one way in which this happened was a small grant being used to help with the planning of a capital project. So there was a community group who had a building that they wanted to repair, and the community grant was used to support developing a business plan so they could go on to apply for larger grants. So big local partnerships hope that by directly investing in local community infrastructure or buildings can help strengthen local organisations as they recover from the after effects of COVID-19 as well. And that also this type of support will help strengthen and sustain the network of organisations and groups, which will help Big Local leave a valuable legacy. So thank you for listening. I'm going to be quiet now in a second to say one more thing. The community grants are resident-led by the people closest to the needs of their communities, and they're providing a small but really significant resource to get new ideas off the ground, enhance existing provision, and bring people together to make their areas a better place to live. So I'm truly going to be quiet now and stop sharing my screen. See you all again, and I'm going to hand over to Edna, who's going to tell us a little bit about how community grants work in Hateley Cross. And feel free, sorry Edna, 1 second, if you have questions that pop up for you, please do put them in the chat, and we'll hold on to those for the Q&A. And also, I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm sorry people out there, if you want to introduce yourself to each other and why you've come along to this session, also do use the chat to do that. I should have said that at the beginning. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm going to hand over to Edna from Hateley Cross now.
Hi, good morning all. I hope you're well, and thank you, IVAR, for giving us the opportunity to join this presentation of your final research report on grant funding. I'm Edna Dunn. I am a resident and co-chair of Hatley Cross Big Local Partnership and a member of the subgroup responsible for our small grants programme. I understand I have approximately 3 to 5 minutes to speak, so I'm going to put my foot on the accelerator, and here we go. As a resident and secretary treasurer of a small tenants and residents association, I would like to talk about how our group have benefited from the Hatley Cross Big Local Small Grants programme, both in terms of confidence building and community cohesion. First slide, please, ladies. Since 2015, when we were at the Big Local pathway point, to today, the association has received just over £5,000 in total. This has enabled us to facilitate in 2015 a Christmas family cohesion excursion to the theatre. Now our kids had never been to a theatre or a panto before, so they were all very excited about that. So that went well. In 2016, another cohesion excursion, this time to Blackpool to see the illumination. So you can imagine from the last trip how excited they were to be going to see the illuminations. Next slide, please. In 2017, we did a family excursion to London, to the National History Museum and Sky News Studios to see Plasticus, the plastic whale. I think you can see it there in the background. It was enormous. This whale was made of recycled plastics, which formed a part of Sky Ocean Rescue Project. I'm sure you've heard of that. From this visit to Sky Studios, the seed was set to start our youngsters litter picking group, which is now going very strong indeed. In 2018, we took a family excursion visit to Barry Island. Barry Island had won an award for being the best clean beach. And obviously this was a follow-up to the visit to Sky News and the constitution of the litter picking group. So that was good for the kids. Following on from that, we did a family excursion to Liverpool. For the kids to see the docks and also go around the museums like the Tate, the Titanic, and of course the Beatles. So that was good. And we also, during that same period and that same grant, we did a family cohesion fun day on the Avenue. And as a consequence of that, we've been able to do fun day on the Avenue or the local green space every year since 2018. Next slide, please. There we go. In 2022, we started a series of coffee and natter mornings with bingo and raffle. And we also did a pilot series of coffee and craft mornings. Now, I mention these events individually because through this funding and through working alongside Hatley Cross Big Local, our association has gained skills in confidence building. And these events that we'd put on in the past, I don't know whether you picked it up, but they've all had a sort of an educational twist to them. And we're very proud of that, and we continue to do that. As regards to our skills and confidence, I can tell you that we've campaigned and succeeded in getting a local derelict building back into use for the community, and both Hatley Cross Big Local and Essex Avenue Community TRA use this newly refurbished facility on a regular basis. We've established the youngsters litter picking team. I think we can put another slide up there, ladies. Have we got the litter picking team? No, not yet. Okay. We've established and grown from strength to strength with the youngsters litter picking team. We've established our coffee and natter mornings, which I can tell you will be self-financing from July of this year. And as you can see, we're piloting now our craft and coffee and craft mornings, and our ladies are thoroughly enjoying that. So we shall be doing further work on that. And because, which is very important, and because we are now skilled and confident in applying for funding from other sources other than Hatley Cross Big Local, we have been able to purchase litter picking equipment. We facilitate youngsters outdoor park-a-size activities. We visited a company in Cambridge that recycle plastics. We've done an educational excursion to Cambridge. And as I say previously, we now do annual cohesion events on the street or the local green space. And of course, we're celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee event. I can go on quite a while longer, but I'm being given the eyes now. So I think I have to stop now. But again, I'd like to thank Big Local and Hatley Cross Big Local Partnership for all their support and guidance over this past 6 years, without which we know we would not be as strong and as confident a group as we are today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edna. That was great. It's really good to hear how these community grants are being worked on, how they're working out on the ground for local people. Fab pictures. So thank you so much. Karen, are you ready? Can we spotlight Karen as well? Vanessa. This Karen Harley is going to tell us a little bit. Karen Harley is the chair of Roseworth, Big Local, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how the community grants work there. I just can't see Karen on the spotlight. There we go. Can see you now, Karen.
Oh,
take it away.
Okay, I can't see myself, but thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of Roseworth Big Local. I want to talk about our exciting Fridays, because the Fabulous Fridays just wouldn't happen without Rosebud grants. It all started off with the librarian had an idea, and she put in for a Rosebud grant to form a friendship group. But there we all are, there at the opening of the community garden, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Most of those people on there are Friday Friends, and Friday Friends started off with about 4 or 5 people. Over the period of time, it grew and grew and grew, and now there's about 15 people. And tomorrow we're going to have a Jubilee party. And, you know, all the Friday Friends are invited. And there's that many of them now, we had to limit it to tickets because, you know, it's so popular and the space is so small in the community cafe. So really it was because we had the volunteers to do the garden. We put in to do the garden because we had the volunteers really. So it was really helpful. And a lot of these ladies, you know, they made mosaics, they painted the fences. It was a little bit of, well, we used them to, I'm sure they all enjoyed it. And we've also created a bingo group, which is on one of the other slides. But we get people coming from the Friday, oh, there's the bingo. Yeah, we get people coming from still in the library as well. It's in the evening. So we've got Friday Friends on the Friday and the bingo group later in the evening. And a lot of people find out about Friday Friends through the bingo and vice versa. And all this wouldn't have happened, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that we gave a Rosebud grant in the very beginning. And now the bingo group is up and running. It doesn't cost Big Local anything. I always say that it's self-sufficient, which it is. and it's a very friendly little group. And now we don't advertise it because we've run out of space. So we really do enjoy that. And at Christmas, we have fish and chips and things like that, you know. And at Easter, we have Easter eggs. But it all started with a Rosebud grant. I mean, in the very beginning, we were in another place. It was costing us a lot of money to rent. And Big Local were picking up the tab, and it wasn't sustainable. So I didn't want to keep asking Big Local for more money. So I decided we'd have to look for a smaller space, which we did. And then we've got like a bingo player from the neighbouring estate. He doesn't actually live in the Big Local area, but he comes and volunteers every single week. And he's 84. And he's called George, and he has such a way with the ladies, and he's calling his numbers out. He has a bit of fun with them all, but it gets him out the house as well. He says he still drives, so he comes over, and we've adopted him as one of us now. And you know, he's really funny. I mean, there was a need for these groups because before the librarian had the idea of having a friendship group. There wasn't a friendship group. So this has really worked really well to get the ladies out the houses. We were planning a trip to Preston Park, which is a local museum in not so distant, well, it'll be next week actually, the middle of next week. So it's coming up nicely now. And the lady you see with me there is my mum. So it's me and my mum who run the bingo. She used to be a member of the partnership, but she's the chair of the local residents association, so she can bring in match funding as well. We both run it together, and we just enjoy what we're doing. It gives us confidence to do other things. You know, making decisions, it boosts your confidence. It makes you realise, you know, like you can make a change. You know, you can do that. And as long as it fits in with our plan, and look at the priorities when we check the forms. I mean, working with the research team, it's made us look at our forms, make them more user friendly. I'm hoping that we're going to try some of the ideas that's come up with the research. So we're going to reach more people. That's our aim, is to give 12, well, at least once every month, give a Rosebud grant away.
Thank you, Karen. Is it okay if we would love to hear more, but
yeah, that's fine.
Time we still want to hear from Jane. Thank you so much for sharing. It's great to hear about all the activities that people are up to in Roseworth.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. Jane McPherson is the community worker for Kingsbrook and Caldwell Big Local, so she's going to share some of her experiences now. Thanks, Jane. Go ahead.
Thank you, Houda. Yeah, here at Kingsbrook and Caldwell, we've had a community grants scheme running from the start of our Big Local, and we've given out about 37 small community grants since 2014. So various different things, equipment for play areas, boxing, activity sessions, roller skating, workshops, just all sorts of different things. During COVID, we, as a partnership, found things quite difficult, but we were able to use our grants programme to help with some fresh food parcels for the vulnerable, at Christmas hampers, at the Christmas that was pretty much a lockdown, toys for the children for the local community. So making a real difference, even though we weren't able to get out and about as much as we'd all like to. So working with IVAR has been a really useful tool to reflect, something that Houda mentioned earlier. We have just spent the last year consulting with the community and looking at our new plan, which is going to take us to the end of the big local programme. And one of the things that we wanted to do was look at whether the programme, the community grants programme, was working well, what we could do to change things, and what we learned from it. So it was a really great opportunity to sort of have a look and think about how we could make things a little bit different. We started using some of our money to help to restart some of the groups after COVID and after lockdown finished. So that's been really useful for local groups to actually just get back out there and start doing things again. Difference to the partnership over the years, they started from a position of feeling a bit worried about being responsible for that amount of money and spending it wisely. So it's been great to see how people's confidence have grown as they've sort of bought into and understood the process of the grants and made sure that that they have a framework to work from and that they're supported. In terms of learning skills for their own roles, so some of our partnership also are part of other community groups, and it's helped them in their own roles for applying for money, because they've realized as part of them evaluating other people's grants is that they're learning, oh yes, I should have included that, or I could include that next time. So it's been really great on an individual level for members of the partnership to be able to learn how to do things better themselves. And it's also giving them confidence to be able to say no if a grant isn't appropriate and doesn't fit in with our criteria. So that's again giving power back to the community and being able to do things like that. So I wanted to just give a quick story about one of our community grants, which is Coffee Pot. And Coffee Pot are a social group. They're a very close-knit group. They most of them have mental and physical health conditions, long-term illnesses, and they come together for a cuppa and a tea cake or a crumpet. And one of them turned around and said, I can make toast at home, but it just doesn't taste the same as when I come to Coffee Pot. So it's really about reducing isolation. The group were established and then lost their funding and lost their support. So they came to Big Local and asked for a community grant to keep them going. They were really nervous. They'd never ever applied for money before, so we were able to support them, and our local CVS was able to support them to be able to apply for the pot of money, which was awarded. They came and talked to the partnership. It was something they'd never done before, so absolutely they were terrified, but once they'd done it, they felt so much better for having come and done something like that. Very proud of themselves, and they're now self-sufficient through small weekly charges. Can I take the next slide, please? So in 2020, as we all know, pandemic came along, and Coffee Pot weren't able to meet, and that really affected them, because they were people who were isolated. They were people who were struggling with their mental health. And what happened was that the lady who ran Coffee Pot, we talked to her and said to her, how do you feel about trying out this new Zoom thing? And her first thing was, oh, can't do that, never ever going to be able to do that. And she, despite that, learned how to do it. And as you can see from the pictures, we started to go on Zoom. She had amazing help from local trust, who were able to put us in touch with somebody who could talk her through getting online. And then through her getting online, she went out to her Coffee Pot group and brought everybody else online. Again, people that aren't used to using technology in this way, but were able to come together and just felt amazing about being able to be together again, and continued being online right the way through the pandemic, keeping people connected, helping their mental health. It rippled out from just the weekly connection online, and they were sending each other messages. We then went on, Mags was invited to tell her story on a local trust workshop. And so again, doing something she'd never done before, she shared her story. She was talking about how she got everybody online, how they'd overcome difficulties, the technical difficulties. And if we can go to the next slide, this is just a little clip of Maggie had told her story. And these were all the people that were watching her and listening to her. And this is what was said. You can
comment, really. I'd just like to say what a star you are, Maggie.
Don't you make me cry in a minute?
What a star you are, and how many people you've helped in your big local area.
It's good.
It's good.
It does make you feel good.
Of course it does. Well done.
And if we can go on to the next slide, please. It's just the last word is the coffee potters, as they call themselves. This is these are the things that they said when they got online. This is the difference that community grants can make. And going from that very small first grant to reset them back up so that they could meet together. We've gone right the way through to Maggie speaking on a workshop which she never thought she'd be able to do, and all of these people are meeting up again now face to face, and they're self-sufficient. They're going to carry on that way, and it just they're continuing to support each other, which is fantastic. Houda, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's really interesting to hear about both the kinds of things that community grants are supporting, but also how being involved in community grant making has given partnership members skills and confidence to go on and do different things. So I'm going to hand over to Claire now, who's going to facilitate a bit of a Q&A and share any reflections that she has.
Thanks, Houda, and thanks Edna and Karen and Jane for sharing your perspectives on what it's been like being part of working with the big local. It was really interesting, I thought, to hear your different perspectives and the roles you've played and what you've gotten out of the research. So there's a couple of questions coming up in the chat, but I thought I might just kick off, chair's privilege, and ask you what you personally have found to be most, the most positive experience you've had in terms of getting involved. What motivated you to get involved in the first place with the work that you're doing, and what would you say to other people who might be a bit uncertain about what it takes to become part of a community grant making program or applying for funding? What would your advice be, and what have you gotten out of it personally? Who wants to go first? Shall I look at you, Edna, first?
Oh, okay, why not? Right, which is like a two-part question, really, isn't it? So the biggest challenges was how to make it attractive and accessible to groups we want to involve. Knowing what is wanted in our community after 2 years of lockdown, that was a challenge. Another one was sort of getting the balance right between smaller and larger amounts, i.e. Move information for large grants and smaller grants. So, if it was a smaller grant, they would only need to say maybe fill in a couple of pages, maybe 3. But for the bigger grants, it would need to be more substantial. But by not making it too heavy, because I think that scares people. And so that's what we felt were our biggest challenges. And the biggest opportunities was to re-engage with communities. We've done some work on that, but it gives us the opportunity to re-engage with them and the groups post-COVID, because it was a completely different situation to previous, and to connect with our small grants into our overall community plan, getting so that we can meet the criteria we've set, go out there and find out. And to this extent and get the best out of the small grants. We did a thorough mapping process where the different groups were, you know, some that we'd missed. So that's been a great.
I think, yeah, it's so interesting, that post-COVID picture, isn't it? Because
yeah,
that's come up a lot, I know, through the research. It's just, you know, I think you all went into COVID with a good sense of what was going on in the local community, and then that really changed quite rapidly through the pandemic. Jane, what about you? What have you found to be most rewarding from being involved in the work that you do, and also some of the challenges that you've encountered with your community grant making?
I think rewarding is just allowing small community groups in particular to try stuff out. So to see if it works, to be able to fail if they need to, and what they learn from going through that process, and what we learn in terms of being able to provide other support going forward. So that kind of local connection and being there is brilliant. And being able to see the difference that these things make, being on the spot to be able to go and see community groups when they're doing whatever it is they're doing. That's all been great for the partnership and in general. Challenges, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, and I think that can be quite scary, especially if you've not made those sorts of decisions before. It's very easy to sort of sit back and point at councils and other statutory organisations and go, oh, they've wasted so much money. But when you're suddenly given this huge pot of money to spend wisely for your community, it's amazing, but it comes with quite a big feeling of responsibility. So that confidence thing is huge. It's had to grow, and people have had to accept the fact that sometimes you have to take a risk on something. It might not always work, but you might not always work in the way you expect it to, but it always does work out somehow, and there is learning in there. So
great, thanks, Jane. And Karen, there's a couple of questions in the chat about how you've been, you know, taking that responsibility and making it work in practice. So how has that decision making worked at a community level, and you know, how do you decide ultimately which activities and groups get support?
Well, we look at our plan. When we get the Rosebud grants in, we match them up with the need. If there's a need and it fits in with the plan, we can make a decision on if it fits in with our priorities for a start. And we can scrutinise the form to see, you know, that if it's going to be fitting in somewhere, because we don't like to duplicate things. I mean, if someone puts an application in and they want to do, say, like a keep fit sort of type of thing, we can actually inform them there's already is one. So we like to know what's going on in the area, and that's been a challenge since COVID, because everything's changed. So we have to find out what's going on all the time, and it's meeting people as well, and it's just getting out there and revisiting groups and relaunching ourselves. And we've really had a good look at our Rosebud grant form, making sure it's fit for purpose. We just have to publicise it now.
Get it out there in front of people's noses. And there's a question as well about, you know, clearly there's a lot to be said for community grant making and power being, you know, held by people in the community. But also, in your experience, do you think it's harder to say no because, you know, you're all in the same place, from the same area, facing similar issues?
Oh, I don't know.
What's your experience of saying no?
We have a board of people who look at the grants. We're all there. We take a vote. We get the paperwork through before our board meeting anyway, so we have a chance to ask a lot of questions if we want to in WhatsApp or in emails. Make it very simple. So there's lots of opportunities to ask questions. So when you actually make the decision, it's not hard to say no, because you've looked at it thoroughly and you've had a chance to really understand it. And if you say no, you say no, and we say, well, what reason are you saying no? And then we find the reason, and then we can explain, so we give people feedback.
Can I add to that, Claire? Just because one of the areas we worked with Rastrick isn't on the session today, but the way that they dealt with the kind of saying no thing was that it wasn't a no forever, and quite often people needed just a little bit more support to develop an idea a little bit further, and that they would help areas to do that as well.
And Edna, you shared some lovely examples of activities that you've been able to deliver with the support of the big local funding. How do you as a community come up with those ideas and agree what the money's going to be used for?
Well, we've already, as far as the association's concerned, we're focusing on our youngsters and family cohesion and respect. We started from a base of on the avenue. We had lots of antisocial behaviour, drunkenness, drug dealing, and a group of us started doing neighbourhood watch, and then we found that it was more about more than just neighbourhood watch. We wanted people to show respect to one another. I mean, at that particular point, we didn't even know who lived a few doors away. We didn't. But now, you know, people, as you just go out to your car, if somebody's out, you know, I get, morning, Edna, you know, and I'll say, oh, morning, Carol, how are you today? And we're able to talk. We were more about cohesion, so we knew what direction we wanted to go. We knew we wanted to try and bring respect into the association. We knew that to give the youngsters a chance, we've got to nurture them. And so we know what we want to do. We want to bring people together. We want to, and the kids, we want to get them to show respect. And I mean, we've gone from strength to strength with our litter picking team. I mean, we have an award scheme now, and I mean, the kids are at my house to collect the equipment 20 minutes before I ask them to, you know, and then, you know, they go around there litter picking, and they come and check Edna, and they come running up the street telling me what they've done for the day. And I don't know whether I've answered your question, but
You have, I think.
We are about community cohesion, and we are about building respect, and particularly nurturing the youngsters. I mean, from the grants that we got originally from Houda Cross Big Local, we've now had a lovely 5-year grant from another funder, and that project is aspiring our youngsters to become good citizens. And really, that's what we're about. So that's how we move forward.
Great. I think, you know, the themes that really have come out to me from what you've all shared is around sort of togetherness, and, you know, having that sense of a shared endeavour and space for people to come together and connect. Seems to have like really come through really strong from the examples that you've been sharing. And then there was the final question, if anybody else wants to just pop any burning questions in the chat, was around confidence, because you've all spoken about, you know, the growth in confidence and the growth in confidence in the community and from being part of the process. How have people in the community gone on and used that confidence, you know, in other ways? What's it spurred them on to do?
Do you want me to say?
Whoever, yeah, jump in.
Well, I mean, we had a young lady who, single mum with some children. Unfortunately, during our process, she lost one of her children with a brain tumour. And this lady is a very talented lady, very, very talented lady. And, you know, she was doing some work with the association beforehand. And of course, with all complications, she had to sit back, and we've watched her sort of come back to us. And now she's the leader on the coffee and craft sessions, and she's the one that's doing the crafts and passing that on. So, and then we've got a Karen knows, dear Polly, dear Pauline. I mean, she was just gone 83, and she's come on such a bundle. She's so kind. The kids love her. You know, one of the kids come up to her the other day and said, Pauline, are you 100? She said, no, I'm not 100. You know, oh, my mum said she thought you were about 100 now. No, I'm not. But the little kids, you know, they make such a lot of fuss of her, and it's great. Just the intergenerational feel that we've now got in the street. And Pauline, I mean, she's renowned for a tombola. We call it Polly's tombola. When we have events, Pauline does the tombola, and people just give her stuff for the tombola. You know, so
you always need someone like that who's willing to be the collector.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big responsibility for Pauline, you know. I mean, it's got to be done right, you know. So
no, it's great. Thank you, Edna. They're brilliant.
Going on.
No, brilliant examples. But Houda's now given me the eyes because we're running out of time, and I know that she wants to wrap up the session and share the links to the report. But thank you all. You know, I think you've really brought it to life, and really, really, like, you know, thank you for making the time to share those experiences and also be part of the action research, because I know that Big Local are going to make great use of your experiences and reflections. Over to you, Houda.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks so much for chairing, and thank you to all of our speakers. You really do bring it to life. It would be much more boring if everybody had to sit here and listen to me for 30 minutes. So the research is going to be live tomorrow, and we will share a link with you when that goes out. And I'd just like to thank you all for coming. I'm sorry to the person that posted a question in the Q&A that I didn't see, because we were using the chat, but you can contact me afterwards if you want to find out any more. And likewise, if you have other questions or want to connect with any of the speakers, and I'm sure that that can be arranged. So thank you. I hope everybody has good days, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.